tarder, je vais revenir sur d'abord l'agenda. Donc, l'agenda du week-end citoyen de la filière d'anglais, comme vous pouvez le constater. Donc, on a de 9h50 à 10h05, installation des participants, donc avec le comité d'organisation, n'est-ce pas, de la Fédération des clubs d'anglais, et suivi du mot d'ouverture du directeur du pôle, le collègue Dr. Aladji Mamoudou Sané. Ensuite, après son mot de bienvenue, on aura le mot de bienvenue du président de la cellule d'anglais, le docteur Alassane Abdoulaye Dia, suivi également du discours d'inauguration du président de la Fédération des English Clubs de l'UN-CHK, Papa Alioune Fall. Et à la suite de son allocution, on aura un panel, une conférence directe sur YouTube, animée par le professeur Scott London de Randolph-Macon College University des États-Unis. Donc, il va nous présenter un thème très riche sur le nationalisme américain, American Nationalism. Et donc, comme vous pouvez le constater, je serai le modérateur de ce panel. Et donc, j'invite vraiment surtout les étudiants à bien se concentrer sur cette thématique et voilà, parce qu'il sera très riche en échange. OK? Donc, pour le samedi, à partir de 9h30, 12h30, donc nous avons ce que nous appelons le service à la communauté au niveau de chaque ENO, n'est-ce pas, dans tous les ENO du Sénégal. Donc, les étudiants concernés par, disons, par ce service à la communauté sont la P10, P11, P12, ainsi que les clubs, donc, les partenaires. OK? Donc, sans plus tarder, je vais donner la parole au directeur du pôle, le collègue Aladji Mamoudou Sané, sorry. Il va nous faire son allocution. Merci.
Thank you, dear moderator, dear colleague, Viodemba Sissoko. I'm going to proceed in English. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, dear colleagues, dear students, special guest, it's both an honor and a pleasure for me as the Dean of the Faculty of Art, Humanities, and Education to take the floor today on the occasion of this meaningful and forward-looking initiative, meaning the launch of the Federal English Clubs and the hosting of our first citizen weekend under the Community Service Program. This moment marks what we call a turning point in the way we think about the university's role, not only as a space of learning, but also as an engine or a tool of social responsibility and transformation. And it is also, by the way, a step forward, building bridges between knowledge and community impact. So the implementation of this new academic framework is not simply a structural reform. It is also a call for a new academic spirit, one that connects the knowledge we produce on the real and the pressing need of the communities around us. In this regard, the Department of English, under the leadership of Dr. Alassane Abdoulaye Dia, has taken a remarkable step forward by designing an event that balances intellectual engagement with active citizenship. So the two-part nature of this weekend, the virtual conference on Friday and the field activity on Saturday, reflect the holistic philosophy of the community service program. Let me take this opportunity also to congratulate the organizers, the faculty members, and especially the students who continue to show leadership, creativity, and purpose in all that they do. The creation of the Federal English Club is not just a formal gathering of students' organizations. It is a platform for empowerment expression. and collaboration. It offers our students the chance to sharpen their language skills, grow their civic awareness, and shape their identities as engaged citizens of the world. To finish, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Professor Scott London, who has willingly accepted to give a talk online on this occasion. Professor, you're welcome and thanks for your intellectual generosity. And I wish every success to these important events. Thanks to all.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Dean of the Faculty. I will now give the floor to our colleague, Dr. Alassane Abdoulaye, Head of the Department of English.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Sissoko. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dear Dean of the School of Humanities, Social Science and Education, dear Speaker, Professor Scott London, dear colleagues and tutors, dear staff members of the main administration in the School of Humanities, Social Science and Education, dear President and members of the Federal English Club, our ambassadors, distinguished guests, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In my capacity as the chair of the Department of English, I'm very delighted today to talk to you on this special occasion as we celebrate the civic weekend of our department, which also marks the official inauguration of the Federal English Club. This event is far more ceremonial. It is symbolic of the great steps our department has made towards significant innovation and its renewed commitment to community engagement. This is a fruit of endless efforts of our institution and our dear students who have shown their will and zeal to work together to unite and build a community. Yes, this was a dream and it has come true today. So let us keep the promise and commit ourselves to the growth of the institution and the community as well. Indeed, today is a great day which proves that we are at the intersection of academic transformation and social relevance. More significantly, it coincides with July 18th, the birthday of Nelson Mandela, now considered Nelson Mandela Day. Today is a community service day. It is an honor also for us to celebrate an African icon, a great leader, and a legend. Over the last 2 years, we have reimagined our curriculum, not merely to follow trends, but to bring change and innovation. The revision of our academic frameworks and bachelor programs reflect a national and international pivot, a move from passive learning to purpose-driven education. The innovation includes community service as an integrated component of our academic journey and other interesting courses that connect students to the professional world and open doors to job opportunities. Among these, one can mention tour guide techniques, labor law introduction, ITCE approaches, teaching methods, communication, digital citizenship, and so on and so forth. We have, alongside this, launched a vocational bachelor program that tailors a professional profile ready to integrate into the job market. We are very proud of that. Dear colleagues and collaborators, this is not a minor adjustment. It is an important academic shift. We are asserting that education should not only inform minds, but also transform lives. Our students are not just recipients of knowledge, they are agents of change. And how fitting it is that today's celebration coincides with July the 18th, as I said, the International Nelson Mandela Day. Madiba, a giant of justice and global symbol of servant leadership, once said, I quote, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the life of others," unquote. Today, I echo this call. Madiba's life exemplifies the essence of what we strive to cultivate in our department: a sense of purpose, a spirit of service, and an unshakable commitment to community. In alignment with these ideals, we are proud to embed community service as an academic requirement. This is not just an opportunity to give back, it is a formative experience that builds character, empathy, and real-world competence. We are training citizens, but not just graduates. As we also launch the Federal English Club today, I would like to congratulate the chairperson, Mr. Papa Alun Fall, and all the board members on the wonderful jobs they have been doing. In the same token, I invite all our students to follow their steps and take an action. The Federal English Club is a platform where language meets leadership and where ideas become initiatives. English clubs are very important and they contribute to the training of students. It is a place where students socialize with their peers and build competencies in public speaking, critical thinking, and leadership. As a former English club leader, I had been chairperson of the English club of my former high school in Podor, and then both Secretary General and chairperson of my university's English club at UGB. This was a great experience, and we built a big community of English lovers. When I finished my terms, I could not leave the club because of the passion and what we achieved. We used to call the English club our second home. Then later I became advisor to English club for more than 10 years. So make the Federal English Club and your local English club your second home. Dear students, this is for you. It's a platform and an opportunity. In this spirit, I would like to share with you a guided framework for the journey ahead, what I call the 4 Bs. Listen to me today. I want to share with you some values. And these values are expressed in 4 Bs, like the letter B. Please let us always connect to the 4 Bs. I would like to share with you and adopt them as a motto. Be, belong, build, and become. The first B is affirmative. It means be aware, be committed, be your true self in the pursuit of excellence. The second B is affiliative. It means cultivate a strong sense of identity with the institution, your peers, and your education, your community. The third B is creative. It means build knowledge, build relationship, build impact through purposeful engagement, build people and build a community. And the fourth B is transformational. It means become a leader, become what you want positively, become the servant, become a change maker, the citizen our world desperately needs. So everywhere we are, we should respect the values of the 4 Bs. If you decide to take affirmative, affiliative, creative, and transformational actions, you commit yourself to apply the 4 Bs I said: be, belong, build, and become. Thus, you make impact and change not only your community, but the world. Let us be proud of what we are. Let us belong deeply to this academic family. Let us build together a future rooted in innovation and compassion. And in doing so, let us become worthy of the legacy of icons like Nelson Mandela and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my role model. From these influential leaders, we have learned that education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. But before ending my speech, I would like to acknowledge some people and authorities who have made this event possible. Oftentimes, people say it is not easy to single out, but it is important to mention. Please join me to thank the speaker of the day, Professor Scott London from Randolph-Macon College, USA. He is not only a colleague, but a nice friend. Let us thank him for accepting to give a talk on this occasion on American nationalism. On behalf of the institution, I say thank you so very much, Professor London. I should like to express my deep sense of gratitude to my colleagues in the Department of English. And I should think of our colleague, the late Ahmed Ndiaye. May his soul rest in peace. I should thank the staff, the tutors, English clubs, English students, students of the Department of English and other departments who are ready to accept the English club, and the various components of our institution, namely in French. I should name them in French so that they hear me. DVS, DDC, DIDZI, DES, DCM, DEFI, pôle, LSHE, and all our collaborators. Without your help, this would not have been successful. So it must be, and let us work forward together. Keep the journey and the dream with courage, with creativity, and with conviction. Now I finish, and join me to solemnly declare official the inauguration of the Federal English Club of Sheikh Hamidou Khan Digital University. Then, its president, Mr. Papa Alioune Fall, is going to make his first official speech right now after me. Thank you for your attention and congratulations.
Thank you very much, dear head of the department. And I think now is the turn to Papa Alioune Fall, who is the chairperson of the Federal English Clubs of our digital university, Sheikh Hamidou Khan. Papa Alioune Fall, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cicero. Thank you, Mr. Abdoulaye, and our dear Mr. Alhaji Mamadou Sane. So, dear Dean of the School of Humanities, Social and Education Sciences, dear Chair of the Department of English, dear Speaker, dear Professor and tutors, distinguished guests, dear students and members of English Club. It is with great honor and pride that I stand before you today as the President of Federal English Club of Sheikh Hamidou Khan Digital University on the occasion of the celebration of our civic weekends. Today's event is not only the official inauguration of our federation, it is also a significant celebration of unity, service, and commitment to our community and to the value we share as learners and leaders. Joining an English club is not just only for learning a foreign language, it also opens our mind to the world, exchanging ideas, building bridges between culture, and above all, using our knowledge to make difference where we live. With this federation, we aim to go further. To strengthen collaboration among all English clubs, to promote academic excellence and English proficiency, and make English a tool for leadership and community action. I would like to sincerely thank our professors and tutors and the administration for their guidance, the English Club, also President for their leadership, and every student who has chosen to grow through service and communication. Together, let's make this federation a space of growth, creativity, and positive impact. Go English Club, go the Federal English Club, and may this civic week be a new chapter in our journey. Thank you, and let us learn, serve, and lead together. Thank you, dear Abdoulaye. Thank you, dear Mamadou, and thank you, Mr. Sissoko.
Thank you, Mr. Fall, for your brilliant speech. Now is the time for me, dear colleagues, dear students, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is with great pleasure and a deep sense of responsibility that I take the floor as moderator of this panel dedicated to a theme as crucial as it is timely, that is American nationalism. First of all, allow me to express my sincere thanks to the Department of English of Sheikh Hamidou Khan University for this remarkable initiative, which gives real meaning to civic engagement within the framework of the new academic curriculum. Beyond its practical and community dimensions, the civic weekend is also a valuable opportunity for intellectual awakening and intercultural dialogue. Today, we have the honor of welcoming as our keynote speaker, Professor Scott London, Associate Professor in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminology at Randolph-Macon College in the United States. A recognized expert on cultural and political dynamics in contemporary societies, he will shed light on the origins, forms, contradictions, and implications of nationalism in the United States. Professor Scott London has a BA in political science from Vassar College and a PhD in cultural anthropology from the University of Arizona in the United States. He is currently an associate professor of anthropology in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminology at Randolph-Macon College, where he has taught since 2001. Randolph-Macon is a small private liberal arts college offering a bachelor's degree in the social sciences, humanities, arts, and natural sciences. Dr. London's primary research interest is in the intersections between gender, law, and culture, with a particular interest in gender-based violence. He has conducted research and published on this theme in both the US and Senegal. His dissertation addressed family, law, gender, and violence in Senegal. He has also conducted research on race and international education in South Africa. He has also served as an expert witness in cases involving Senegalese individuals applying for asylum in the US. His current research examines sexual assaults on university campuses in both the US and Senegal. To this credit, Professor London has several publications, among which we can mention London Scott and My Role, forthcoming, Compromising Content, a peer-led ethnographic exploration and sexual assaults on a small college campus in Proceedings of the Southern Anthropological Society, 2024, edited by Manzola and Molinari. London Scott, also this is another publication, and Sergi Lim, 2024, all right? Part 2 in 50 Key Scholars in Black Social Thought, edited by, Akrak and Han, New York, Routledge. Bislow, Denise and Scott London, this is also another publication. Culpable Victims, Good Guys, and Thesis. Rape, myth, acceptance, and group membership at a small college. We have another publication with Kristen Claren, 2020, Flipping the Microscopes, Fieldwork, Race, and Peer Education in a South African Travel Course. Another one is Constructing Gender, Legitimating Violence, Gender Differences in Senegalese Narratives of Domestic Abuse. Dear colleagues, I would like to welcome this opportunity to warmly congratulate my colleagues, Dr. Alassane Abdoulaye, head of the department, and Dr. Alhaji Mamadou Sane, dean of the faculty, for their leadership and dedication in organizing this event. Your efforts have brought us together as a department and a community. This weekend is more than a gathering. It is a reminder of our civic responsibilities as scholars and educators. It challenges us to engage critically and inclusively with the world around us. I therefore invite you to listen carefully to Professor London's presentation to take notes, and above all, to engage actively in the discussion that will follow. It is through dialogue and collective reflection that knowledge is truly built. Thank you for being here. And I now officially declare the panel on American nationalism open. Enjoy the session, everyone. Professor London, over to you.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. I'm sending a request to share my screen.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, let's see. Can you see that all right then?
Yes, you can see.
All right, wonderful. Hello, everybody. It is such a real pleasure for me to be here. Can you hear me okay? Is my volume okay? Yes? Okay, I see a thumbs up. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today and to participate in your program, and congratulations on inaugurating this program. It looks really wonderful and staffed by some people who seem quite dedicated to not only the subject matter of promoting English instruction, but really to the knowledge and development of their students. I've been very impressed. And let me just take a moment to say that one of the real pleasures for me of doing research in Senegal has been working with Senegalese colleagues and students and building those relationships. I have never met a more interesting, knowledgeable, and dedicated group of people as I have here in Senegal. And I'm speaking both about my faculty colleagues and the students that I had the pleasure of working with. So I express my gratitude for those wonderful experiences that I've had. My presentation today is titled American Nationalism, Contradictions, Half-Truths, and One Complete Lie, and you'll see what the lie is in just a moment. I should begin by saying that while I'm very happy to talk about this topic because I think it is such an interesting and important one, this is not my area of expertise, as you could tell from the introduction. So I am not a political scientist. I'm not an historian. And so what I've chosen to talk to you about today on this topic is a series of observations that seem important to me and seem worth sharing and worth discussing. But I will be very, very eager in the question and answer period to hear your comments, to hear your questions. But also, I hope you will feel free to challenge me. I always encourage my students to not take what I say at face value, but to question me and challenge the premises of what I'm saying. I also have to say that I'm used to speaking very quickly, and I'm going to make every effort to slow down and speak slowly and clearly, so that all my friends and colleagues out there who are at different stages of learning English feel that they can follow what I have to say. And if anything needs to be clarified in the question and answer, I will be very happy to do that. I've broken my talk down into two parts, and I'll say just a little bit about myself, and your very warm and thorough introduction really covered all the points there. I don't have anything to add, and I'm grateful for your kind words. I will say that because I'm not an expert on American nationalism, if this is a topic that is interesting to you, please do seek out other opinions. Seek out people who disagree with me. If you think I have a liberal slant, go find some conservative voices, or if you think I'm too conservative, go find some liberal voices and balance out your perspective on this important topic. I really just see my perspective as one among many. The bulk of my talk I'm going to split into two, because I see, this is how I see the topic of American nationalism. The first being what it means to be an American, who we are, how we are defined, how we define ourselves primarily. And so I want to talk a little bit about American national identity and what that feels like, how that's constructed. And I'll make some historical comments too, although I am in no way trying to be historically thorough. So please forgive me for just making a couple of brief historical references without trying to fill in a lot of details in the interest of time and some of the limitations on my own background historical knowledge. But again, in the Q&A, we can discuss those more. And then part two is what America means. What does America mean to the world? What is American nationalism? Not simply for Americans, but for the wider world. What are the ideas that shape America, and how are those encapsulated, in my view, in stories and slogans that sort of tell the story of what America is and what America represents. So those are the two parts of my talk. These points have already been covered generously by my introduction, so I won't say anything more. If anybody is interested in hearing more about my research in Senegal at any point, I'm certainly very, very eager and happy to discuss that. I want to start out by talking about biases and opinions. I always encourage my students to be aware of the bias, not only, or let's say the potential bias, not only of the professor or the expert who is in front of them, but of their discipline. Different disciplines of study have different built-in assumptions. And I think it's part of a student's education to become aware of those. It's too easy sometimes for students to assume that everything they hear is objective and correct. And certainly, we can at least say, I think, that every field of study has its own biases, and anthropology most certainly does, for better or worse. And while I may agree with most of them, I'm still aware that they are starting assumptions. They are not necessarily objective truths. So when we talk about nationalism, what is anthropology's bias? Well, I think the first one that's most important to observe is that anthropology is a discipline that is deeply dedicated to the idea of diversity. We find human cultural diversity important, real, fascinating, and really something to be valued. That is the raison d'être of, and yes, raison d'être is English because we borrowed it from the French, so I'm allowed to say it in a talk in English. The raison d'être of anthropology is the study of human diversity. We begin in anthropology with the premise that all human beings are the same. We're all the same species. We're all the same subspecies. What makes us different from one another, primarily speaking, is our cultural differences. Those cultural differences are something to be appreciated, something to be studied, something to be valued. The idea of nationalism, perhaps not always, but frequently, is really used to tamp down, to flatten out, to try to reduce or remove the idea of diversity. Nationalism is often the idea that there is one right way to be the member of a nation. There's one right way to be American, for example, and so that American cultural diversity from a nationalist perspective is in some way problematic. Anthropologists would push back and say, no, in fact, nationalism can be seen as a threat to that diversity, and we should really be cherishing that diversity rather than trying to get rid of it. And by extension, I think nationalism, nationalist ideology, nationalist programs at the level of the government or the state can be used to try to control people's speech, to try to impose a certain conformity, and to punish those who do not conform. And finally, nationalism can be used as a justification for, I'll speak in the American context now, specifically, nationalism can be used to justify a kind of global bullying. I think that part of the American presence on the global scene is one of we're the big kid on the block, and you should do what we say. And that American national ideology, in some of its forms, tries to support that idea, tries to justify that idea. It's okay for us to be a big bully. It's okay for us to push around other nations. We deserve the right to do that because we're special and we're powerful. And in that perspective, anthropology as a discipline would really push back very strongly on that, in part because bullying isn't nice, and in part because global cooperation is something that is often, if you're interested in meeting human needs, if you're interested in fairness and justice, if you're interested in human rights, global cooperation is a much more noble goal than being the big kid who threatens all the littler kids. Let me pause here just for a moment and note that as I'm going through this slide, certainly I and perhaps some of you are thinking about current events and thinking about the Trump administration and some of the things that are going on right now. I am very, very happy to talk about the Trump administration and current events. I don't feature them in the talk because I wanted the talk to be a little more global. I will reference it a little bit, and you'll see that it is certainly relevant. In the question and answer, I am very happy to talk at more length. So please do not take my limited reference to the Trump administration as a lack of willingness to talk about what's going on currently. What are my biases? What are my opinions? I talked about anthropology, so let me say this. And I tell my students, you may not know a lot about your professor's personal life. That may be none of your business, but it is okay for you to ask them their personal opinions about the topics that are central to the course that you are taking. So let me say something about my own views about America as a nation and American nationalism. And I'll be very honest, as I was creating this slide, I was imagining my children watching this presentation someday. I don't think they'd be particularly interested right now, but they may stumble upon it at some point. And I can imagine them saying, "Gosh, Dad, didn't you have anything nice to say about America?" And I am very critical in this presentation, but of course I have some very positive things to say as well. I love my country. I'm very proud of my country for many reasons that I can talk about. I feel very lucky to be an American. I am also deeply critical of my country. I'm deeply critical of my country as a scholar, and I'm very deeply critical of my country as a citizen. And I think that this statement, this contention, raises an interesting question that goes beyond just me, which is, can criticism of one's country, should it be considered anti-patriotic, or can it be considered patriotic? Often when people make critical comments about the United States, and as you probably know, right now, my country is deeply divided about many, many issues. And many people who are speaking out against some of the policies of my government, some Americans who are speaking out against some of the policies of my country, are being accused of being anti-patriotic, or are being told to leave the country if they're not happy with it, even if they're Americans. You know, I would make the opposite argument, that being critical can be a deeply patriotic act, because it shows that you care. It shows that you care enough to be critical because you want your country to do better and be better. And so you make these critical observations for that reason. And so that is certainly my motivation. So as critical as I may be, I consider myself to be a patriotic person. So what I told you I was going to lie to you. So let me begin with this lie, because I think it's a lie that really is at the heart of many people's ideas about American nationhood and nationalism and what it means to be an American. And that lie is, hold on, let me just adjust my screen a little bit here so I can see a little better. There we go. Is that being an American has nothing to do with race, that American citizenship is equal for all citizens. And let me say a little bit more about what I mean by that. When I was in school, what I learned was that I wasn't simply told that being an American has nothing to do with race. It's that the idea of race was really not even part of the discussion. When I was in elementary school, when I was in high school, we really didn't talk about race very much, but we did talk about the idea that all Americans are the same under the law, that we were a nation of law and order, and that this law and order were impartial, meaning they didn't treat people differently based on their identity, whether you were a woman or a man, whether you were of whatever national origin or ethnic group or religious group. The country, the nation, the state, the government, the legal system, the political system saw you as the same. And as a result, you enjoyed all the same opportunities. You enjoyed the same status as an American, and you could expect access to the same opportunities and potentially the same quality of life. And there's many different ways to critique these statements, and I don't have time to get very far into them. I did want to note, though, that even in the Declaration of Independence, which is the statement by which the United States declared its independence from Britain, where you know, we used to be a colony too, just as Senegal was, and we have our Declaration of Independence, which is our statement that we often refer to, even though I assure you, most Americans have not read it, and yet we hold it very dear. And certainly our Constitution which I would also suggest most Americans have not read, but we hold these documents dear because they are our founding documents, and our founding ancestors, the men who wrote them, bequeathed to us. They gave to us as a gift down through the generations these documents, which are very wonderful and powerful and valuable for all sorts of reasons, and we continue to benefit from them. Nonetheless, refer to Native Americans and enslaved Africans and their descendants as people without rights, as not even people. So from the beginning of our nation, this nation that treats everybody fairly and equally, by its very definition, is still nonetheless finding insidious ways, ways to define some members of the population as not having these basic rights, not meriting equal treatment, and I'm trying to find the right words to express this feeling, to my embarrassment, to acknowledge that often seen as not part of the human family. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit here in this next slide. Oh no, here we go. Sorry, this slide gives a little more detail. So the words that we hear in these discussions that we're having, in these classes that we're having in American elementary school and American high schools, often center around these words: freedom, liberty, equality, opportunity, and democracy. And there are some others that we could add to this list, but this is sort of a core list of words that encapsulate concepts that we are meant to learn as young Americans as part of our core values, that these are attributes that we all share as Americans. Another way to get at this is to say, what does it mean to be an American? How does one American know that they belong to the same group as another American? What do we share in common? What binds us? What links us? And what we learn early on as young Americans is it's this list, it's these words, it's these concepts: freedom, liberty, equality, opportunity, democracy. And I don't want to appear too cynical. These are true in many ways, and they are moving and important words, and they're words that we should remember and always try to get closer to, even if our past efforts have been wanting, even if our past efforts have fallen short, as they certainly have in many ways. It is very easy to take these words at face value as you are coming of age as a young American. You're coming out of the American school system. I can speak for myself. As I graduate from high school, as I prepare to go to university, it is very easy for me to not question these words too much. This is especially true for those of us who grew up white. We had less reason to question them based on our own experience, and we weren't necessarily being told by adults in our environment. Often we certainly were not being told this by our teachers, that whether we were white or black or from some other background, hey, maybe not everybody gets equal access to these beautiful words, these beautiful ideas, these beautiful concepts. And maybe part of being an American should be not simply taking them at face value, but rather questioning them, that is a patriotic, nationalist act to question so that we can try to get closer to them. Instead, we are often discouraged from doing so. And I would argue that perhaps today, in today's America, we are being discouraged from questioning these words more than we have been in a very long time. I'm going to give you just one set of examples, and this is a little bit partial the way that I'm doing this, but in the interest of time, I wanted to just give one sort of illustration of why I'm saying we have fallen so far short of attaining these ideals. And it just comes down to one comparative case study. I could, or my colleagues could, do a whole presentation, not a whole presentation, a whole course, a whole semester on the kinds of social and economic and political inequalities that we see in the United States. And indeed, in my department, certainly my sociology colleagues and my criminology colleagues do teach whole courses in which they explore these things in depth. But I wanted to see if I could give one sort of comparative set of statistics or figures to give a sense of what I mean by the fact that America falls short of its ideals. So, for example, when we talk about wealth, we ostensibly, we presumably have equal opportunity in the United States, and yet white families, on average, have about $280,000 in wealth. And I'll let my Senegalese colleagues who are curious, who want to get out calculators and figure out how much that is in CFA, to do so. I didn't have a chance to do that myself. That's a lot of CFA, I can tell you that much. Now, it's very important to point out that there are a lot of poor white families and poor white individuals in the United States. These are averages, okay? And if you take this comparison to the average Black family, about 45,000, which is quite a small fraction, right? That does not mean all Black families are poor or do not hold family wealth. But these comparative averages do say something, do point to a very deep truth, I think, about American life and this idea that everybody's equal and everybody has equal opportunity. I think, in my opinion, in my interpretation, statistics like these really show that is not the case. And we could dissect these figures and say a little bit more about them. Life expectancy. I think this one, I chuckle not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. To be white in America means you get an extra 4 years just for being white. Now, of course, these are averages. Not all white people live longer than all Black people, but these averages are stunning. To be Black means you get 4 fewer years than to be white. This is funny only because it's tragic. And in the wealthiest nation on earth, one might even argue that it is inexcusable, and that our government should be doing everything it can to find the root causes and to try to create a more just, equal society where there is more liberty and freedom and opportunity for all. And I do not believe that is the priority of our current government. And we see some tragic, some comparable tragic comparisons when we talk about infant mortality and maternal mortality. In a nation that has access to the best medical technology on earth, that has created much of this technology, we do not make it equally accessible to all Americans. And as a result, far more Black infants die than white. Here, I feel more like crying than laughing because this is such an unavoidable kind of tragedy. Black mothers are twice as likely to die in childbirth as white mothers. This is America. So I give you these statistics, and this may feel like it's a little bit off topic, but I don't believe that it is, because I think that it goes very much to understanding something about what it means to be American, because what it means to be American in a context like this really means very different things to different people. And again, let me just emphasize that these are averages, not absolutes, and that's always important to highlight. And of course, I'm comparing Black and white. Those are not the only ethnic groups in the United States. If we look at Latin Americans, and certainly if we look at Native Americans, Native American statistics and figures, when we look at these kinds of variables, Native Americans are often far worse, significantly worse. And so some of the, I think some of this tragedy explains aspects of Native American life as well. I'm going to shift gears again and take a little bit of an historical perspective. And please forgive me for just dabbling in history without really providing much historical context. I'm going to just make some assertions, and I'm going to be very historically imprecise. Really, in the interest of time, I would love to have another 5 or 10 slides here where I'm talking about the specific illustrations, and I'm going to do something that many scholars, certainly if there are any historians watching, they're going to be cringing and saying, he's saying the late 19th and early 20th centuries as if that's just one big block of time. And clearly I am masking a lot of very diverse and different and detailed stories pertaining to each of these groups. But I do want to make some generalizations, because I think these generalizations are valid, and I think they tell us something about what it means to be an American. And I think what I see, what I interpret anyway, when I look at American history, is a lot of effort made at the social level, at the political level, and certainly at the legal level, to keep America or make America more white. Remember my premise earlier. I told you I was going to lie to you and say that being American has nothing to do with race. And yet, and that's an ideal, and it's something that many American people continue to believe. But I think that when we look at certain periods of American history, and we will extend this a little bit into the present as well in a few slides, the effort has been made to try to make America more white by keeping non-white people out. And we see these efforts at different times through different methods used against the Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese, certainly Jews, certainly Arabs, Italians, Greeks, Hungarians, Mexicans. And it's important to talk about Mexico because they are our large neighbor to the south. And we fought a war with Mexico. And as you may know, if you've heard of states like California, Arizona, New Mexico, much of Texas, they used to belong to Mexico. And we took almost half of Mexico away from them through conquest. I'm laughing again, not because it's funny, but because it's, in my opinion, it's tragic. So we talk a lot about Mexico, but we also want to keep in mind people from other Latin American, Central and South American countries. We're also subject to exclusions, to bans and to quotas. And forgive me for going through this a little quickly. Again, I'm happy to elaborate later on what I mean. Sometimes these exclusions took the forms of quotas. We'll let in only a certain amount. Sometimes they take the form of outright bans. People from these ethnic groups or people from these countries. In some contexts later on, people from these religious groups. Religion certainly plays a role here. As well. There's all sorts of complicating factors here that I could allude to, but I'm going to continue to generalize. Now, one thing that you might start to notice, as you may already be anticipating what I think is the next slide, if I remember correctly, is that aren't some of these groups anyway, aren't they white? So London is saying they're keeping non-white people out to have a more white nation. What does it mean to be an American? Well, if the majority population, if people in government want America to be more white and they're trying to keep out non-white people, why are they keeping out Italians and Greeks, and aren't a lot of Jews white? And thank you for thinking that, because that's exactly what I want to get to in this next slide, because to look at American history in terms of race and ethnicity is to grapple with the question of who is white, or to put it in a slightly awkward phrase, who gets to be white? Who wins the game of becoming white? And again, please forgive me for glossing over a lot of historical detail and for glossing over a lot of very, 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 very important differences in the experiences of these different groups. And I'm doing so in the interests of making a larger point. But certainly, for much of American history, Jews were not considered white. And that includes Jews who looked white. Some Jews look like me. I'm Jewish. Some look more North African or Middle Eastern or East African. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. My Jewish grandparents and great-grandparents, despite their light complexion, were really not considered white by the mainstream American population, and to some extent, at different points, by the government. Similar discriminations were made against Arabs. There were moments when Arabs were white, and there were other moments when no, of course Arabs aren't white. And these determinations were often made for very arbitrary reasons. We like to think that these things are well reasoned and decided by intelligent members of Congress or intelligent presidents or intelligent bureaucrats, and often they're made very arbitrarily, and often they are made by people who are looking at these issues through the filter of their own prejudices. We take people who you and I today might readily agree are European and white, Polish people, Russians, Hungarians. Aren't they white? Wouldn't they be readily identified as white if we saw them walking down the streets of San Luis? Wouldn't we go, there's a white person? Italians, Spanish, Greeks, well, some of them, their complexions may be a little darker, but the point is that skin tone is only part of the equation when we talk about who gets to be white. Whiteness has to do with a more complex identity that really speaks not to skin tone, but to membership in the mainstream culture. And membership in the mainstream culture is only partly a function of skin color. It is also a function of assimilation. Has your group shown a willingness to assimilate to the mainstream? And we could talk for a long time about what we mean by assimilation. I'll simply say here that what it means to be an American has meant for these groups and many others their ability, their willingness, their eagerness to assimilate to mainstream culture. Sometimes this simply means the younger generation adopting the habits, the popular culture of the mainstream, right? So your parents don't understand rock music. You buy all the Beatles records to show that you are an assimilated American, even if you're Jewish or Italian or Greek. And sometimes it's as simple as you learn to speak unaccented American English. Your parents are immigrants and they still have an accent. Well, you learn to speak in a way that is American and signals to people in the mainstream culture that you are part of that culture because of your use of language. Sometimes it's not as simple as that. Sometimes it takes a lot more effort. And I think anthropologists are very sensitive to the fact that often this signals a loss of cultural identity. Assimilation does not necessarily require a loss of cultural identity. It doesn't necessarily require loss of language, but often it does, and often it has, and often in ways that we see as a real loss and something very, very, very sad. And so people, and again, I'm speaking in generalizations, forgive me, but people have often changed religions as a way to assimilate. No doubt many people who were Muslims converted in American history in order to be seen as mainstream. For example, many Catholics have converted to Protestantism. So that's one form that we might see. Another is it's one thing to learn unaccented American English. All young people will do that. But often what has happened is that the ancestral language, the immigrant language, is forgotten. Sometimes immigrant parents will even insist that their children only speak English in order to encourage their assimilation. That is the perception, that there's such a high risk with being seen as different, with being seen as an immigrant. There's such a high risk associated with that, that it's better to just lose the ancestral language altogether. Americans are often criticized for only speaking English, and this is a criticism that is often largely valid, and there are many reasons why this is so. We're not great language learners in the United States. Part of it may have to do with this history of suppressing immigrant languages in favor of American English. I also just want to say at the bottom of my list there is the Irish. Again, we may say the Irish, surely they're white, but there's been such a history in the 19th and early 20th century of prejudice against the Irish, in part because they're Catholic, in part because of their tensions with the English, that their assimilation took some time as well. And I think assimilation has been particularly challenging in unique ways for both Native Americans and Latin Americans. And it's important to signal those unique challenges. But we have to ask who has had the biggest challenge to assimilate. And who can never really win the whiteness game. Again, let me just speak for a moment as an anthropologist. We believe deeply in anthropology that race is an illusion. Another way to say that is that race is a social construct. Race is not real. It is not an objective fact. We are all one species. We are all one subspecies. We are all an African species. All of us have ancestors from Africa, somewhere between 50 and 60 or 70,000 years ago. That's not a lot of time from an evolutionary perspective. And we are not a very biologically or genetically diverse species. And yet we seize on the superficial aspects of our appearance, and we give them enormous social and political and economic force. And so to be of African descent in the United States, to be Black, carries with it a particular burden when it comes to assimilation. So what it means to be an American for Black Americans is distinct and different in some really crucial ways. And we could talk about the enslavement of Africans and their descendants in the United States. We could talk about Jim Crow. We can talk about all different kinds of systematic prejudice and oppression and exclusion of African Americans throughout American history, and including systemic prejudices and racism into the present day. But in my reflection on this idea of whiteness, I think it's particularly important to talk about the experience of Black Americans, because while some ethnic groups, some immigrant groups have been able to fight their way, so to speak, to whiteness, that door has been closed for some groups simply because of what they look like, and that's something that I think is part of this lie that race has nothing to do with what it means to be an American that I've been speaking about. I just also want to go back to this idea of exclusion of non-white people, just because it may occur to some of you, and it brings the discussion into the current day. And I'll mention these very briefly, but I'm happy to talk about them more, which is recent and current efforts to, as I keep asserting, make America more white by keeping non-white people out. And again, I chuckle, not because it's funny, but because I see it as absurd. You may have heard of the Muslim ban, which was back in 2017, shortly after President Trump became president the first time. And this was an attempt to ban entry into the United States for people who were mostly from Muslim majority countries. This was challenged quite a bit in court, and was only partially ever enforced. Now, in 2025, in my personal view, they're only getting started on putting together lists of people that they want to keep out. So far, the bans that they're talking about, either total or partial bans, and these have been put into place, and there will be court challenges, but these are mostly African and Middle Eastern countries. Sometimes you'll hear the argument made, this has nothing to do with race. These are just dangerous countries, or the people who come from these countries are more likely to commit acts of terrorism. That is often the rhetoric that we hear. And I have to concede that it's not only about race, but I think it's foolish to suggest that it's not at least partially about race. And I think especially in 2025, people in my government are becoming more and more bold about referring to things in more explicitly racial terms. That's how it seems to me anyway. Okay, part two. I don't have a lot of time left, but I think there's a few important points here that I still want to make before we get to the Q&A. And so here I'm shifting a little bit from what does it mean to be an American to what America means. And I want to start with this observation, and it's a very anthropological observation, although I don't think it's something that is not widely understood. And perhaps you want to reflect on this from your own national experience, which is that nations are not only built on territories. We may think primarily, or we may think first and foremost of a country, of a nation as a piece of land with borders that are defended, and you cross into that territory, and you're in that country, you're in that nation, and you cross that border again, and you leave it behind, and you're no longer there. But nations are more than just territories. They're also ideas. They're also belief systems. They're also ideologies, and they're also stories. That all those aspects of nationhood that have to do with thoughts and feelings and ideas are contained in stories. And sometimes those stories are reduced to simple mottos or slogans that perhaps only a word or two or a short phrase. And we use these stories, we use these slogans, these mottos, to teach our children about what America means, to teach ourselves, to teach each other about it. We repeat these stories, we share these stories, and we tell outsiders what these stories are. And when we tell outsiders what these stories are, as Americans, part of what we're doing is saying, look, this is who we are. This is who we are on the world stage. This is who you can expect us to be. This is who you have to deal with. So what I'm going to do is give you a list. And this list may or may not be familiar to you, but it's very familiar, I think, to most Americans. Hold on, my screen is blocked a little bit here. Let me see if I can move this. Okay, I think I can see enough of this screen. So I'm just going to read these quickly, and what I want you to just reflect on is that whether or not you are familiar with these terms, and you may well be, these are the things I heard growing up. So this is part of the American education system, and part of being inculcated, part of being trained in what America means. America is the greatest country in the world. I chuckle, not because I don't love my country, I do, but presumably other people also feel that their countries are the greatest country in the world. And maybe there's something a little silly about any country saying it's the best. Maybe it's a little bit juvenile. But nonetheless, you hear this a lot as an American growing up. America is welcoming and generous. It's part of our identity, part of our, I'll use a little bit of a psychology term, part of our self-concept, the way we see ourselves and the way we expect others to see us as well. America is a beautiful mosaic, meaning Americans come from lots of different places. There's all these different ethnic groups, racial groups, whatever you want to call them, religious groups, and that creates something diverse and beautiful. America is a champion of human rights. I'm going to come back to some of these. America is the land of the free. Every American child, I assure you, has heard this phrase and sung songs about it even. America is the leader of the free world. I think this really comes from the Cold War. And it's a phrase I heard a lot growing up, being the age that I am. America is the indispensable nation. I like this one. You know, if you want to get something done, if you want to fight a war, you want to end a war, you want to create a new trade pact, whatever you want to do on the global stage, you better come to us first because we're that important. There's a certain arrogance that's part of this way of thinking about what America means. America is the world's policeman. And I think that this also comes from the Cold War, the post-World War II mentality. I can't see my whole screen. Okay, America is a defender of capitalism and democracy, and America is a beacon of individualism. So I'm not going to talk about all of these because I don't have time. I'm going to just pick a few and give you my very personal opinion and reflection. So this is really Scott London's observation. And again, I encourage you to get other people's opinions and feel free to challenge mine. And I'm going to say some very critical things, and I'm going to say some more positive things as well about some of these, and you can see what you think. I want to start with this idea that the U.S. is welcoming and generous. And as you may or may not be familiar with this, but most Americans are, that we have the Statue of Liberty in New York. And it was given to us, it was a gift from France, and it was meant to symbolize the U.S. as a country that was welcoming of immigrants. We may laugh at this notion now because we are trying so hard to not be welcoming of immigrants in 2025. But this was part of the American national identity that France, our ally at the time, wanted to help us celebrate. And there's this poem that's at the base of the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is what many immigrants saw as they were coming into New York, the landing site of many, many immigrants coming from Europe and elsewhere. So this was very meaningful. It's not just sitting in a museum somewhere. This is meant to be public facing. And you depending on your level of English, you may not know all the words here. It's a bit of a, it's very poetic language, but I think you'll get the idea. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses learning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And for you English professors listening, forgive my attempt to read poetry aloud. It's not a talent of mine. But I just to summarize the meaning of the poem, it's not simply saying, yeah, America is a welcoming place. It's saying, those of you coming from foreign shores who have struggled, who are struggling, please come here. Those of you whose lives are not easy, but whose lives are hard, please come here. The subtext, I believe, is please come here because we believe in you. There's something deeply optimistic about this poem, even though it has these very harsh references. There's something deeply humane, deeply optimistic. Please come here because we need you, because we believe in you, because we believe you will help us build a strong and powerful and worthy nation. Immigrants here are not seen as a burden on society. They are seen as contributors to society. And that this mindset, this way of looking at immigrants has gone through many changes, as you know. And if we fast forward to today, we see something quite dramatically different. And let me just explain briefly some of these images, which may or may not be familiar to you. So what's going on in America right now is an attempt by the Trump administration to create mass deportation of immigrants, especially those from Latin America, And it's being done, in my view, in a particularly cruel way. First of all, it's being done in a way where often due process is being avoided or being suspended. So people are not, potential asylum seekers, for example, are not being not being allowed to make their case before court, as is their legal right. But it's being done in a cruel and harsh, dehumanizing way. Families are being separated. Non-citizen parents are being taken away from their citizen children. And it is really very sad. And it's really being done in a way where I think the cruelty is sort of part of the point. And I think it's hard to make this point briefly, and we can talk about it more, but I think that there's an effort to condition Americans to think of immigrants as, I'm trying to think of the right word, as undesirable, as perhaps not fully human, as dangerous, and part of the irony, the very strange irony of what's going on here, is that at the same time, the Trump administration is offering refugee status, as we're rejecting refugees from countries that are war-torn, where people are being persecuted, where there are genocidal wars going on. We're not accepting those people as refugees, but we're accepting white Afrikaners from South Africa. I'm happy to talk more about why I think this is just comical and bizarre, more in the Q&A, but it makes for quite a contrast. I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit, but I will try not to talk too fast, and I apologize if I've been speaking quickly. I want to say something very positive because I've been quite critical. So you also hear growing up as an American that that America is a beautiful mosaic. What America means is this fact of our diversity, that diversity is not a weakness but a strength. And let me read you this statement from Andrew Young, who is an African-American statesman, and he was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Jimmy Carter. And he said, "We think America is a beautiful mosaic. A mosaic is an art form where you take different kinds of broken pieces and you glue them together to make a whole, which is imperfect and yet beautiful in a unique way. We think America is a beautiful mosaic. It is made up of these different kinds of people, every race, every ethnic group, every language, every culture, every religion." And indeed, when we talk about immigrants these days, we're so focused on people from Mexico, and the majority of people, at least at different times, have been from Mexico. There are 190 countries represented among immigrant groups in the United States. This is remarkable. I think, as a citizen and as an anthropologist, I think this is absolutely wonderful, that all the opportunities to learn, to hear about different cultural experiences, for people from different cultures to encounter each other and learn from each other, from quote unquote mainstream Americans to encounter people from different countries and cultures and to learn from them. I tell my students to seek out these opportunities because this is how we grow and expand our own experience. If you look at the U.S. population, hundreds of different ancestral groups are part of it. The ancestors of current Americans come from all different corners of Earth, and there is something quite beautiful and special about that. I as an anthropologist, I have a certain resentment against the notion that this is not something that we should be proud of. I was stunned when I read this figure, because when I study Africa, for example, so many African countries, people speak dozens, if not hundreds, of different languages, and it's quite remarkable. And of the world, 6,000 or 7,000 different languages, a good portion of them are spoken in Africa. I was really surprised to read that there are between 350 and 430 languages spoken in the United States today. I'm going to keep using the word beautiful because I think it is beautiful. That's remarkable. And I think that's some part of what makes America special. There are 574 different federally recognized Native American tribes and a few dozen others that have different statuses. And that's also remarkable. Now, Native American tribes have often been treated very, very poorly by the American government and by their fellow Americans. But I want to say something positive about the fact that these are living, vibrant cultures that make up part of the fabric, part of this mosaic. And that is something that is very special, that we have these indigenous groups that are still vibrant in our country. And then if you travel, I mean, America is a big, beautiful, varied country. And if you travel around, you discover hundreds of different regional cultures and subcultures. And that for those Americans who think we should be less diverse, and even the word diversity is being discouraged and even outlawed in some contexts, I'm happy to say more about that. We are diverse, and it's really too late to do anything about it. And I think it's something to be celebrated. Just a couple more slides, I'm almost done. What America means, we are a champion of human rights. Now, some of my colleagues and friends may say, Scott London, have you always gotten human rights right in the United States? Have you always been on the correct side of human rights? And I would say, well, no, we have not. Sometimes we get human rights really wrong. And again, I chuckle, not because it's funny, but because it's a little bit, there's some tragic history there that we can talk about. Nonetheless, I will take a stand and say that to the extent to which the human rights project, human rights discourse, human rights law has become a useful set of tools in the modern world in the last 60 or 70 years, it is in thanks part to Americans who, after World War II, took a strong stand in favor of human rights, helped to create the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm certainly not giving Americans all the credit here by any means. If you want to read or watch an early speech validating and celebrating human rights, watch Roosevelt's speech on the Four Freedoms. It's this old recording in black and white, and the sound is not perfect, and it's very staticky, and yet it's deeply moving. It's very short. And he really breaks it down to four basic freedoms, and including freedom of worship, and it's really quite moving. So I don't give Americans all the credit, but I think they deserve some of the credit for having taken a stand in favor of human rights at key moments, despite some shortcomings as well. And I think this is my last slide. Yes, okay. And I told myself, in case my children ever watch this, that I would end on an optimistic note. And so let me do that here. So one of the things, this is a very tough moment in American history. And I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something pessimistic, and then I'll say something optimistic, and then I'll be done. I think that we are really battling against forces of tyranny and despotism that I did not expect to see in my lifetime. I think for many people who grew up in my generation, my parents' generation as well, we are in a continual state of shock at some of the things that we are seeing coming from our government that seem deeply anti-democratic. However, I think we have a remarkable tradition of free speech and protest in the United States. Remarkable. It is a deep and varied history, and it is something, it's maybe the word I'm using more than any other in this talk, beautiful. Really a beautiful tradition of exercising free speech as I'm doing now. Listen, I said I'm proud to be an American at the beginning. I'm proud to be an American in part because I can give a talk critical of my government that may go on YouTube, that people may watch, and I feel safe in my free speech rights because I live in this wonderful democratic country to make these critical comments. Fingers crossed. And so while we see, in my view, terrible actions being taken against immigrants and their families right now, we also see literally hundreds of thousands of Americans taking to the streets in protest against the cruelty and the injustice. This is remarkable. And they're not always being met peacefully. They're out there in the streets despite some of the risks. And certainly in recent memory, Black Lives Matter, I shouldn't say memory, Black Lives Matter remains a potent force. The willingness of Americans to take to the streets to protest government policy and policing policy in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, as you're probably familiar with. Again, a testament to American freedom. When injustice is done, Americans' willingness to be loud about it. There's a lot of hate and cruelty in American rhetoric right now. If you listen to our politicians, not just President Trump, but many politicians, they're preaching hate. And again, in a way I never expected to see in my lifetime. Or if they were, there would be immediate pushback, immediate criticism. They would be shut down, and too often they are not. But I believe, and this is my American optimism here, I think this is temporary. This is not who we are. We are not really this hateful and this cruel. I think some hateful and cruel people have gotten very powerful recently. And so it seems like this is who we are. But this is not who we are fundamentally. And this moment will pass. I believe that in my heart. Americans care more about fairness, friendship, collaboration, and generosity than our current government appears to be. I think the American spirit is deep and optimistic and really cares about these values, even if our government does not seem to be reflecting those values. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again, Professor London. Please join me, dear colleagues and students, to warmly thank and congratulate Professor London for his insightful and thought-provoking presentation on American nationalism. I think now with that enriching presentation concluded, we now open the floor to the audience for questions, comments, or reflections. Over to you, dear colleagues and students.
Do I need to stop sharing my screen? I can't tell.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much once again for this brilliant presentation, dear professor.
Thank you very much. Professor Jha, is there anything else I need to do to unshare my screen? Or am I okay?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, hold on. I see the control now. I'm sorry, I didn't see it before. Stop sharing. Okay, very good. I am very eager to hear any comments or take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, dear students and colleagues, the floor is yours for any question, comments, or reflections over the topic. Or Prof. Jao, do you have any contribution? Read the topic, pending maybe.
Right. Yes,
okay. Yes.
I was
Come on.
about to raise
Thank
my
you.
hand.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if you allow me. So thank you, Dr. Sissoko, the moderator, and thank you, Professor Scott London. I am really very pleased, to have you here around and deliver this interesting talk to our faculty members and to our students on the occasion of the celebration of and the inauguration of the Federal English Club. I once again acknowledge, your commitment to collaborate with me and to help our university. Thank you so very much and congratulations. As a specialist in American studies, I'm very curious to share with you some points. Maybe some of our students do not know it, or many people do not know that about American politics or American culture. The fact that there are nations within the American nation. For example, the Muskogee Nation. I have a colleague at Western Washington University, Professor White, who is a Native American. And he is very proud every time to talk about his identity, not as an American, but as a Muskogee. I remember one day we were walking around going to the frontier next to Richmond in Vancouver in Canada. And then we came to a checkpoint and they had to check each of us their identity. I had my Senegalese passport and they had to say, okay, show me your ID. He said he did not bring anything. He has his identity as a Muskogee Nation, not showing his American passport, but he showed his Muskogee Nation ID. So, and many people are asking, how can America be one big nation and have inside it, and also we know what Oklahoma represents in terms of, of land issue and everything, the massacre of Muskogee in Oklahoma. How do you appreciate the fact that there are nations within the American nation talking about, the federal recognition of the existence of tribal nations within America? I know it reflects cultural diversity, but doesn't it at some point lead to geographical or political divide of America? Yeah, that's and the other question is, in modern America, Trump said during his inauguration that the time has come for a modern America to show it. That's the golden age of America. Simply because politically he has based himself on the fact that he is a second after Cleveland to get a second non-consecutive term after Cleveland in the 19th century. Trump is a second one to get a second non-consecutive term. And he referred to this as a golden age of America. But the thing is, Trump's administration, in his decisions, the executive orders, he tends now to designate an official language of America, which was not the case. America is America. We all know US. And now Trump is imposing, what would be the significance of saying that English is going to be the official language of America? While America defines itself as, a multicultural country, a country that is reflected by the beauty and the diversity of its culture and its population and everything around. Once again, these are comments, but I want to know your opinion about the existence of nation within nations. to resume my question, and then to come back on Trump's decision on his executive orders to decide English are going to be the official language of America. How would you put this in the context of nationalism? Thank you.
Thank you very much, your colleague. Over to you, Professor London.
These are wonderful questions. Thank you. I like both of these a lot. I think that it's hard to talk about Native American groups as all one thing when there are so many different ones. And you're giving one example among many. And I think I don't anticipate how do I say this? The legal status of Native American tribes has been up for grabs for centuries, and there's literally centuries of jurisprudence on their status, and it's different for each different tribe, and tribes have had to struggle mightily for recognition and for access to for resources in terms of help from the government, but access to natural resources as well, like fishing rights and timber rights and things like that. And in many ways, they've gotten a raw deal. And it always feels like their lives are in the hands of the US courts to decide what their status is. So federally recognized tribes, there are other tribes that are not federally recognized, but for federally recognized tribes, technically they are in some sense considered separate nations, and that the relationship between them and the US is sort of meant to be based on a certain kind of nation to nation kind of diplomacy, but I think it doesn't always work that way. I think I'll say something a little bit cynical, which is that I think most Americans, unless they live adjacent, most Americans who are not Native Americans, unless they live right next to a tribe, don't really think about Native Americans. There's a lot of stereotypes about Native Americans. There's a lot of children's books that promote those stereotypes, and then there's movies and TV shows that promote those stereotypes. So I don't think a lot of Americans are really thinking deeply. I think the moment when Americans think about Native American tribes is when a court or a legislature, or state legislature, decides that the tribe is going to get more rights. And then people get upset. And then people go, hey, wait a minute, there's a Native American tribe there, and it's unfair that they get to do this thing. And sometimes that turns into protracted legal and political battles. Do I think there will be increasing political divide as a result in the future? I don't know. I don't know if this will not happen currently, but if in the future the courts give more autonomy and more independence to more tribes, you might see a configuration that looks more like a sort of a multinational kind of North America. But I don't think that's how most Americans perceive it now, no. I'm not sure that's a great answer to your question. So let me answer the second one, and then if you want to say more about the first.
It's good. I just wanted you to come back on these comments to help some of the audience understand these details they might not know well. It's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. English is the official language. So the day after Trump issued that executive order, a student of mine came to class, to my cultural anthropology class, and I'm usually very even-tempered with my students. I'm usually very calm. I try to be kind. And the student said, very nice young man, said, so what do you think about the fact that English is the official language of the United States now? And I hit my fist on the desk. And I said, English is not the official language of the United States. Trump signed an executive order. That's not how laws are made. This is not how it's done. Congress needs to take action. And Congress has not taken action. Or there needs to be a constitutional amendment. No such effort has gone very far. English is not the official language. So what does it mean? I think part of, I think this is a two-part answer to the question. The first is really the political aspect, which is, does a president by fiat through executive order have the right to make all these changes? And Trump is doing everything he can to expand executive power and to ignore Congress and to ignore the courts and sort of do what he wants. And then if Congress or the courts want to try to stop him, they can't. The Republican Congress has absolutely not tried to stop him or slow him down. And the courts have been only partially successful. I think what it's going to mean in the short term, I think it's mainly meant as an ideological move. I think it is meant to signal to his political base that the project of making America less diverse is well underway. Yeah, there may be hundreds of languages spoken in the US, and you may hear Spanish in the street, or you may hear Vietnamese spoken in the street, depending on where you live. But, trust me, these are minority languages. They have no status. We don't like them. We don't like hearing foreign languages. English is the official language. So I don't know if it has really the weight of law, but it certainly has the weight of dogma in the weight of ideology. I don't know what Trump will often take actions like this, and there's not necessarily a lot of follow through, and I'm not sure what the follow through will be here. If we start to see more and more states passing laws asserting that English is the official language, what you might start to see, and we've seen this to some extent, especially in the Southwest, is trying to restrict access to government in languages other than English. So, for example, if you're a Spanish-speaking immigrant, and you want to get government services, and you're used to being able to make a phone call in Spanish, or to get an information pamphlet in Spanish, those kinds of things will go away, and only English materials will be available. Things like that, and it has other kinds of implications as well. But I think the purpose is more, I think for the moment, the purpose is more ideological than substantive, but that does not mean that it will not have real world effects. That's all I'll say for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for these precisions. Somebody wanted to take the floor. Toli Kan.
There are questions also in the chat.
I can try to answer.
I have already collected the questions from the chat, but I just wanted to give first the floor to Toli to voice all her mind. I don't know if Toli.
Hello.
Okay, hello, Toli. How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I am Toli Kan, student from Gasambeza University, and thank you, Dr. Dia, for inviting me. So I have a question, which is the following. So my question is,
Yes, come on.
okay. Trump often used slogans like America First and strong anti-immigration rhetoric. So do you think this kind of nationalism is healthy for democracy, or does it risk creating division and also fear? That was my question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Over to you, Professor Scott London, to react to Tole's question, and then we proceed up to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toli, for your question. I really appreciate it, and it's an excellent question. No, I do not think it's healthy for for democracy. You know, there's a nuance here that's an important one, which is that, you know, countries always try to promote their own interests. You know, Senegal does, America does. All countries try to, well, I shouldn't say all countries, but it's the norm for countries to try to promote their economic interests and their political standing. So there's a certain level at which saying America first sounds like, well, okay, well, so what? You know, that Americans saying America first, what's so bad? What's so bad about that? You know, we're not going to say Honduras first. We're not going to say Canada first. Of course, we're going to say America first. I do think it's very unhealthy, though, because it for one thing, it has really been used as a slogan to justify what I think, anyway, in my opinion, is a tremendous amount of harm to our relationship with other countries. So it's one thing to say America first, let's negotiate a trade deal, or America first, let's talk about collaborating in this international organization. And you know, we'll promote our perspective, you promote your perspectives, and we'll compromise. That's kind of how business is usually done, by and large. And I think here there is America First encapsulates a deeper idea, and it kind of goes back to the word bully that I used earlier, that the United States has been, this is not a new thing, has been a global bully in the past, but I think that this global bullying position is really encapsulated by the America First slogan, and strengthened by it. And what's remarkable to me, and what makes me fearful, is that I think we are doing damage to our relationships with our friends, with our allies. The philosophy behind America First seems to be everybody else can go, forgive my language, everybody else can go screw themselves. Everybody else can go, and you know, we are literally punishing our closest allies with tariffs. And basically, I think the Trump administration has said we don't need allies because we are so big and powerful that people will come to us anyway, begging for our generosity, begging for our largesse, begging for our military protection, begging for our access to our markets. Therefore, we don't need to treat people well. We can cut foreign aid, as you've seen, certainly in Africa and elsewhere. We can stop funding programs that help people. And that, I think, those are some of the programmatic ideas behind the slogan "America First." So I think it's very dangerous. It's taking, if you know the term jingoism, which is a kind of a synonym for patriotism, but it's a more kind of extreme version of patriotism. We are being very, very jingoistic in saying the rest of the world can go to heck, and we're just going to do everything for ourselves. So if you believe that global cooperation and collaboration can be a win-win, for everybody. If you see that as a philosophy, then you see this as very, very sad, and very dangerous. And you ask about whether it's healthy for democracy. I think part of my concern goes back to my previous comment about English only. I think that we see we have three branches of government in the United States, just as you do in Senegal and most other countries. We really see this tremendous concentration of power in the hands of the executive branch, which is very bad for democracy. And America First is sort of is one slogan among many that's being used to justify this concentration of power in the hands of one man, and if you read the American Constitution, it's not supposed to be this way. Congress and the courts are supposed to create a balance of power among the different branches. That was the brilliance, that was the vision. That's what our ancestors, that was the gift from our ancestors, our founding fathers, in these founding documents, especially the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And at least for the moment, we are putting those gifts aside, and and we are seeing an experiment in what happens if a president decides to be more to take a more autocratic approach to governing, and I find it very worrisome.
Okay, thank you very much. We now let me go back to the questions from the chat. We have Papa Silla, who asked the following question: does American nationalism still exist in America? Does the American nationalism still exist in America? This is a question from
I see the
Papa
question,
Silla.
and I'm curious about the premise of the question, but I'll answer it at face value, which is that I think yes. I think in some ways there's so many different ways that we could talk about these issues from many different perspectives. As you all know, I think all of us on this Zoom, we could all sit in a room right now and talk for many hours about different aspects of this topic. I think that so one way to talk about it is sort of nationalism versus globalism. Is America at this moment more globally focused or more nationally focused? I think we're very much more nationally focused. So from that perspective, nationalism very much exists for some of the reasons I tried to explain in my talk. If there's a follow-up question to that, I'm happy to say more about that.
Okay, thank you, Professor. We will now give the floor to one of our deans, Professor Jean-Louis Correa, who is the... Can
I answer? I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I answer one of the questions in the chat that I'm very eager to, that I think is a wonderful question, and I just want to make sure that we get to it, and forgive me for interjecting. Is that okay?
Yes.
And I'll be brief. The question is, how do different cultures interact with each other in the United States? From Abdullah Job. And I think it's just such a wonderful question, because you might come away from a talk like this, if you don't know anything else about the United States, with a very pessimistic view of multicultural America, because we know that there's a lot of prejudice. We know that there's a lot of racism. We know that there's a lot of anti-diversity going on in the United States, and that's often what gets talked about. But I want to really push back against that, because at the same time, a resounding yes, different cultures do interact with each other in all sorts of ways every day. People overcome prejudices, people overlook stereotypes, people get to know each other, people associate, friend groups, social groups, at all different levels. People are interacting, learning from each other, enjoying each other's cultures relishing the fact, enjoying the fact. They go to festivals, they go to each other, sort of like in Senegal, they go to each other's holidays, they go to each other's homes. I could go on and on trying to characterize all the ways in which different cultures do interact. So please don't come away with this notion that there's like one dominant culture and everybody else is pushed to the margins and is treated horribly, and that's the only way to talk about America. There's some truth to a characterization like that, but at the same time, perhaps it's too harsh, because in people's everyday lived experience, I think there's far more interaction than we might see. Let's also keep in mind we're talking about a giant country with over 380 million people or something like that. So there's all sorts of variation going on in different places, and it's hard to characterize the whole thing in just a few words.
Thank you very much, Professor London. We'll now give the floor to Professor Jean-Louis Correa, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University in charge of the pedagogy. Professor Correa, over to you. Professor Correa?
I think the technician should give them the hand to speak. Magat, the Magat Sal. The Magat. Is the Magat Sal with us?
Why not call her?
I think if she does not give them the hand to speak, it's not going to be easy.
Possible. Maybe to put their questions in the chat.
Yeah, try with someone else. We will check if it
Okay.
is. Our
colleague Seydou Keita, before moving back to the chat. Seydou Keita?
And Alaji Sane too.
Yes, Keita? Okay.
It
Let
should
me
be a
continue.
technical issue. Yeah.
All right.
Check with Alaji.
Alaji, okay. Can't find the mic. He said that he doesn't, he can't find the microphone. Let us continue with Prof. Alaji.
I can answer
Alaji.
one of the questions that if you would like.
Okay. Yes, I think we can proceed with the other questions from the chat.
Okay. Do you mind if I pick one?
Okay.
Would you like to pick
Hello,
one?
can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. Come on.
Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for giving me the floor. I would like, first of all, to thank Mr. and Professor Scott London for his brilliant presentation. So first of all, I would like just to come back to the title of the presentation. American Nationalism, Contradictions, Half-Truth. Yeah, I think even the title is, it rings a bell. When at first sight, when you look at the title, contradictions, it rings a bell. That's why I do appreciate the critical thinking Professor Scott London has used to, explain from cover to cover the notion of American nationalism. But my concern is, and here I would like to raise this question, Professor, can we say, or do you agree with me when I say that American nationalism is based on, or can be called an ethnic or racial nationalism? It's the first question. Why do I say that? Because if you analyze from daily basis, politically speaking, what we can see is we are under the pressure that there is a kind of racial superiority that is, developed by American, government. And this, racial superiority can lead to a kind of isolation of some group of race, particularly Black people and others. Okay, and another thing is a kind of a battery of contradictions between the ideals led by the founding fathers and the reality. Okay, so to sum up, can we say that American nationalism can be called or can be qualified as an ethnic or rational or racial nationalism? Thank you for your understanding.
Thank you, dear colleague Keta. Yes, Professor London, over to you.
Oh, I'm really enjoying these very well-informed and thought-provoking questions. Thank you. That's a great question. Well, can I just answer by saying I hope not, or should I say more? I'll try to say more. You're right when you contrast the ideals of the founding fathers with the reality. So now the ideals of the founding fathers were problematic too, right? Some of them were slave owners, and it gets a little complicated. But I take your point that this America should never have become a country dominated by ethnic or racial nationalism. I think that I'm just going to take a second to collect my thoughts here. I think that there are some Americans who want it to be a nation defined.
Okay, Mr. Keta, you can put off your mic, please. Okay, thank you.
There we go. I think there are some Americans, and perhaps among them enthusiastic supporters of President Trump, who want to see the nation defined more and more by ethnic nationalism or racial nationalism. So I think ethnic national. So let me answer the question this way. I think ethnic nationalism exists in the United States, or we could call it racial nationalism. Those things are not quite the same, but there's some overlap there. And I think part of my talk was me agreeing with the premise of the question, which is to say, that's why I said the idea that being American has nothing to do with race is a lie, because I think it's so important that we acknowledge the ways in which being an American has so much to do with race. But that doesn't mean that we should accept it as the way it has to be or the way that it always will be. It's not locked in. And I think I say that in part because of this spirit and history of protest and free speech. Because I think that while many Americans want an ethnic nationalism, and sadly many Americans have a racial way of looking at people, and there are certainly many white Americans who believe in racial superiority, sadly, and wrongly and stupidly. That's not all of us, and I don't actually think it's the majority of us. If you'll allow me a moment of reckless optimism, I think a majority of us don't want that, don't want this vision, don't agree with this vision, want everybody to have the same rights, want everybody to have the same opportunities. We love and cherish our relatives, our family members who come from different races and ethnic groups. I come from a multiracial, multi-ethnic family, as do many, many, many Americans. I'm in an interfaith marriage. Many, 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 many Americans have stories like that, and they want to see their country reflect that at a larger level. I think my direct answer then is ethnic nationalism exists, and it feels very dominant now because it's every time I laugh, I want to assure you it's not because I think this is funny. It's because I think it's absurd that the Trump administration has done a remarkably effective job in a remarkably short amount of time to make ethnic nationalism feel like the norm, feel like it's dominant, feel like this is now America, and there's no turning back, and there's no alternative. That's what autocrats do, and they're doing it very, very effectively. And that does not mean they will continue to be effective. I believe they will not. I think that a lot of damage can be done, but I think that in the next election cycle, the upcoming election cycles, we will see big shifts, and we will see other elements of people's perception of what is important about being American come to the foreground. There are so many Americans who love justice and believe in fairness, and who are genuinely of a generous heart and mind. They still exist. They're still there, and you'll see them at the marches and the protests, and you'll see them on social media, and hopefully you'll see them among some of the Americans you encounter in your personal and professional lives, I hope.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor London. We now give the floor to Professor Jean-Louis Correa. Professor Jean-Louis Correa, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, dear colleague. I would like to congratulate the colleagues from the English department. First of all, the director, Dr. Sane, Dr. Ja, and also Dr. Sissoko for this initiative that allow us to discuss this very important issue of nationalism in America and what is America. I would also like to congratulate Professor London. His talk, his presentation is very insightful, and dear Professor, thank you for your presentation. We learned a lot from this presentation. I would like to first give a kind of contribution, and then after have one question in more in terms of provocative question to Professor London. The first question is not a question, but a contribution is related to the one done before by Alessandra, mainly on this issue of nation. From a legal perspective, one should not forget that America is a federal state, but a federal state built on racial consideration. It was at the very beginning for white men, Protestant, etc. And we should not forget this very important decision of the American Supreme Court that was saying that we are equal but separate but equal. And the construction of the nation in America was built on this normative diversity. It was the consciousness of building a nation state, but a nation state built on a normative diversity. It was my contribution first to this debate. My question now to Professor Scott London, whom I really congratulate for his presentation. I hear you saying before that you were very optimistic about a shift of the political situation. I listened to you and I understood that you were more on a anthropologist perspective than on a political perspective. But what makes you believe that the situation could change? And from an internal perspective, what created this situation we are living today? Because when I listen to you carefully, there is a shift in the conception of America. We had this America we all love, this America we know, this America we dreamed of. And we also have this new America, which is kind of a nightmare for you and me and other person. What, from an internal point of view, make this shift occur? What were the ingredients that make this shift occur? Thank you so much, dear colleagues.
Thank you, Professor Correa. Yes, over to you, Professor London.
Yeah, I want to respond to the first part of what you said indirectly, and then I'll try to address the second part. Part of what we're seeing in so as you may be aware, there's part of the program of the Trump administration is really an attack on education in different forms at different levels. Part of it is they're just trying to defund education, so certainly university education will become harder to attain. It's already been far too expensive for a very long time. But also trying to disinvest from education more broadly. But the point I want to make is that it plays out differently in different states. So that's why the picture gets very complicated, and sometimes it's hard to discuss it in simple terms. But what we're seeing in some states is laws that are forbidding or limiting teachers' ability to talk about separate but equal. There's a curriculum that says here's what you can say about the enslavement of Africans. Here's what you can say about the institution of slavery. Here's what you can say about Jim Crow, and then you're done. And if a teacher wants to say more, if they want to talk about modern racism or the effects of modern racism or the legacy of slavery, things like that, in some instances, they risk being reprimanded or fired. And this is a trend, and it's one of those trends we'll see. Sometimes trends like this sort of peter out, but sometimes they pick up steam, and this is deeply worrying to me. Why do I think things will change or will get better? Part of it is I say that in part for a self-serving reason, which is that I don't want to give up on my country for my own personal psychological health, because I have children, and I want them to see, my children hear me complain about President Trump a lot, but I don't want them to feel like they live in a country where there's, no hope for a better future. So, I'm optimistic for sort of pragmatic reasons. But I also have an intellectual judgment, which may be wrong, of course, that our institutions and our institutional norms, even though they're being bruised and battered like crazy, will outlive this one administration. We've seen this before in America. We've seen swings toward authoritarianism. We've seen swings toward anti-immigrant hatred. We've seen surges in racism. We've seen this before, not quite like this, of course. But I do believe the pendulum will keep swinging, and it's not just because I believe in pendulums. It's because I read, I see, I talk to Americans every day who just don't believe in what's happening, who believe in a better America, who believe in an America that's not embracing authoritarianism and ethnic nationalism and these terrible things. There's just and those Americans will vote, and I think they will they will vote intelligently. That's not a prediction for what the outcome will be. I don't know. Things could continue to be bad for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, for another generation. I don't know. But I do believe that the good stuff, the strength in our institutions and our institutional norms, the dedication of public servants, has not gone away, despite the damage that's being done.
Okay, thank you very much, dear professor. We now give the floor to our colleague, Dr. Alaji Mamadou Sane, Dean of the Faculty. Alaji? Alaji? Okay, we go back to the chat. So we have other questions. Papa Aliun Fall, how does modern American nationalism impact immigration policies, race relations, and national identity today? How does modern American nationalism impact immigration?
How does it impact immigration? I don't see the question. I just want to make sure I have the whole thing. How does it impact immigration? Hello? Did I lose you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yes.
All right. Okay. Over to you.
I didn't hear all the question.
Okay.
How does
Okay.
nationalism...
So let me repeat. Let me take it again. How does modern American nationalism impact immigration policies, race relations, and national identity today? This is a question from Papa Alun Pal.
Okay. Okay, let me answer this question slightly differently than I did previously to make see if I can make a sharper point that I think is important to get across, which is nationalism is harming immigration and race relations terribly. So that's the first part of my answer to your question. And I hope there some of that came across in my talk where I see some of those connections. But here's the point I really want to get across. The protest movements, the movements to protect immigrants, have been remarkable. So there's a police agency you may have read about in the news called ICE, and ICE is the federal force that's in charge of. They sort of work with border control to manage immigration, they've been expanded and empowered under Trump to make arrests and to do raids and to do mass deportations. And the last several weeks, the last months, they've been very, very, very aggressive. Americans are in the streets. Americans are in the streets, you know, standing up to them, trying to stop them from entering workplaces. Americans are in the streets in huge numbers. So is nationalism harming race relations? Well, yes, if you look at it from the perspective of the government policy is harming race relations because it is trying to promote, in my opinion, it's trying to promote racial hatred. If you listen to the way Donald Trump and many of his supporters talk about Latin American immigrants, for example, they often use horribly racist language to talk about them, and then that racism becomes dehumanizing, and then that dehumanization becomes a justification for mistreating people, right? So that's sort of how the system works. Americans are not standing for it. I mean, a lot of Trump supporters are celebrating it, and conservative media are celebrating it, but not all Americans are. And that's amazing. That's pretty important too. Now, again, I don't know the outcome, but I'm very proud of my fellow Americans who are saying, this isn't us. We don't hate. We don't think these people are inhuman. We don't believe this is a legitimate way to treat people in a democracy. We don't believe in we don't want to have a police state. We don't want government-sponsored cruelty. We don't want the government to be tearing apart families in our name. And they're trying to do something about it. And so there's a protest movement. There's pushback, and I'm very proud of that. And I think we need to recognize that aspect too, because I think these folks, the protesters, they're nationalists too, right? They're nationalists too. They're patriots. They're patriots. It's a different vision of nationalism, right? It's a counter vision, but it's also part of the fabric of America. And those of my colleagues and friends who are, you know, feeling very pessimistic and perplexed and may have really admired the United States in the past, and now they're going, what the heck is going on? And they're very angry, and I totally understand that response. There's a lot that's going on that's really shocking. I just want to also highlight this other dimension as well.
Thank you, Professor Scott London.
If I can make a contribution. Dr. Sisoko, can I make a contribution?
Americans still regarded as the real Americans.
I'm not sure. I didn't understand that.
You don't catch the point. Okay, so let me take it again. Native. I think this the way he has formulated. Maybe the question is not so well structured, but I can try to reformulate it. Do Native Americans or are Native Americans still regarded as the real Americans? This is what he means.
Mm-hmm.
Are Native Americans still regarded as the real Americans? Yaya Mane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, great, really interesting question. Yeah, well, so here's a really, this is probably obvious what I'm about to say, but I think it's really important to spell it out sometimes, which is that all Americans, right, either, you know, arrived recently, but if they didn't arrive recently, we are all the descendants of immigrants, or we are the descendants of people brought in bondage and enslavement. We are the descendants of enslaved people, immigrants, enslaved people, and indigenous people and native people. That's us. Those are Americans, or those are our three, you know, those are the real different colors that we come in. And there's an irony when we talk about immigration, because, you know, we're all, you know, most of us are not native to our country in a real sense. You know, I'm not. Most of us were our ancestors were forced here, or our ancestors came here, you know, looking for a better life. And then there are the people who've always lived here, right? Europeans did not discover America. Native Americans were already living here and already knew where they were. And the amount of, you know, sort of genocide and territorial theft and expansion that occurred is mind-numbing, is extraordinary. And that story is not often told, or it's not told as much as it should be. So that's my sort of background comment. Native Americans are real Americans. They are all American citizens, as well as being citizens of whatever tribal entity that they may belong to. Yeah, I think the irony is that they have been treated so poorly, by and large, historically, notwithstanding the fact that they are the original Americans. You might imagine we would say, wow, whoa, these people were here first. Let's you know, let's figure out really great ways to coexist with them. And instead, it's been a battle. I hope that answered the question.
Sissoko, can I make a contribution if time allows? Dr. Sissoko.
Yes.
I was asking if I can make a contribution.
Yes. Come on.
Yeah, yes, thank you. It's very relevant, the point that Professor Scott London mentioned regarding some questions, even just the latest one he has answered about American nationalism. I don't know if you remember very well, like the Columbus Day, the Christopher Columbus Day in America. Mm-hmm. They celebrate it as a holiday. It is a federal holiday. But some states, you know, America, they got what they call, you know, federal law and state law. Some states like Western Washington, they don't want to celebrate Christopher Columbus. They change it, instead of calling it Christopher Columbus Day, they call it Indigenous People Day. You talk right now about indigenous people. It's just like what Senegal is doing. Senegal saying that they don't want to have statute of federal, it's going to be Sheikh Amadou Bamba or El-Hajj Omar. They change this establishment. For example, Lycée-Fédère is no more called Lycée-Fédère. It is called El-Hajj Omar. And recently, during the celebration of Gamou Serigne Ababakar, people wanted Lycée Charles de Gaulle to change. It's like to erase the colonial mind and put our local, you know, things. It's the same. Even Americans engage in this kind of debates. You talked about, you know, issue of slavery, former presidents. Yeah, what is funny is the founders of the nation, many of them were slave owners. It started from George Washington. George Washington was a hero, the commander-in-chief who led the Continental Army to lead America to get its independence and to become the first president. General George Washington was a slave owner. Phyllis Whitley, who is the first African-American writer, did write letters, correspondences to George Washington, criticizing the institution of slavery. And the irony is that all the presidents, until Abraham Lincoln, who really sacrificed himself to get the abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment, was a slave owner. Abraham Lincoln himself from Kentucky, he is from Kentucky. He was a slave owner. It is funny. It is exceptionally 2 presidents, John Adams and his son, John Quincy Adams, who did not have any slave among all these presidents, from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln, which is funny. And imagine, after the abolition of slavery, when people wanted to correct, the belonging of people, and African American and enslaved people were given the right of citizenship, 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery, and then the 14th Amendment that gives them, American citizenship, and then the 15th Amendment that gives them the right to vote. How does it come that now, with the second term of Trump, he wants to eliminate the birthright citizenship, which is funny. Linking the birthright citizenship to the immigration issue to try to legitimate his immigration ban, which is funny. And to end, take some red states like Florida or like Kentucky. In the academic curriculum, in some institutions, they don't want people to teach texts like Frederick Douglass because it deals with racial issue. I talked to a colleague last year in Kentucky. They said, I was teaching Frederick Douglass, I was teaching Equiano in Western Washington. He told me, how can you teach that? We cannot teach these texts in Louisville, in Kentucky. It's because that's the land of Abraham Lincoln. I told him, how can you deny students to learn about slavery in the land of Abraham Lincoln? It's so funny. And somebody else told me that he is teaching in Florida, and they don't want people, they don't recommend texts like this. It's very sensitive. Maybe it can engage in racial issues, something like that. But I don't think American democracy should be like that. It should be bigger than people think. It should not be this kind of political and ideological divides that still characterizes the fissures of American democracy. It's just a contribution to help some people, understand some detail. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
May I respond just briefly?
Yes, over to you, Professor.
Yeah, these are really great points that you're making. Thank you. Another something sort of along the lines of what you're saying in a different domain is in the last 2 administrations, efforts were made to take the names of Civil War figures from the South, from the Confederacy, to take their names off of monuments, off of schools, off of the names of military installations, things like that. And that trend has been largely successful. I saw this play out. I live in Virginia. I saw all this controversy around school names and going to school board meetings and everybody arguing about whether a Confederate name was part of, Southern tradition and it wasn't really racist. And, you get into these crazy discussions. But what's happening under President Trump is that they're putting Confederate names back on a lot of these things. Which, it's disturbing. It's a little bizarre. And it shows, I think, their dedication to a kind of desire to have a very expansive kind of propaganda. The idea that you can't teach about slavery, or you can only teach about it in a certain way, is really spreading among certain states. It is. I think I'm really glad that you're highlighting the difference among states. If you look at New York or Massachusetts or Maryland or most northeastern states or California, you're going to see a much different picture, where these topics are taught, and they're taught in depth, and they're taught in a fulsome way. So there is a tremendous amount of division along these lines. It hasn't, in my understanding, and I don't have mastery over this material, but it's been since the 1950s where you really saw a widespread effort to ban books, to limit the way books are taught or to take books off curriculum. It's really a shame that that's happening, and it really is, an attack on freedom of thought. And part of what's interesting, intellectually interesting, but also very disturbing about it is so much of the rhetoric behind it is protecting our children. For those of you, my colleagues, fellow professors, if you're looking for interesting assignments for your students in American Studies or English, have them look at some of have them go to news articles that cover some of these debates in southern states and have them do an analysis of the language that's used, like in legislative debates or town hall debates. A lot of it is we must protect our children. And some of the rhetoric and some of the legislation actually says we have to limit. I think this is the language in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. You can't teach material that is designed to make students feel uncomfortable or guilty. Right? Now, I don't want my children to be too uncomfortable or feel too guilty, okay? But the idea behind it is really, I think, is you don't want white kids to go, oh my God, slavery was horrible, and you don't want them to start thinking about ideas like white privilege. And so the idea is these exposure to these ideas will just be disturbing to children, will make them feel psychologically, guilty or feel uncomfortable in psychologically unsettling ways, and this is harmful to them. I think this is a ridiculous notion, obviously. We want a strong democracy is one in which we have a well-educated population. That's something our founding fathers certainly believed in. And it's okay to be a little uncomfortable in the classroom, right? Being exposed to new ideas involves that sometimes. So I think it's really ludicrous. Let me just make a brief comment about birthright citizenship, since you mentioned it, and I think it's such an important topic. I'm really floored by this one because it's in the Constitution. And so I don't understand how it could not require a constitutional amendment to change it. And I'm not a lawyer, but certainly what the Trump administration is trying to do is to do it through executive order. The current situation is if you were born in the United States, you are a US citizen. This was meant to enfranchise freed, enslaved people, and it had other purposes as well. And they want to undo that. But since it's in the Constitution, it seems to me it would require the very complex process of going through a constitutional amendment. And that's not what they want to do. What they're trying to get away with is doing it by executive order and getting the Supreme Court to sign off on it, and then they'll just do it. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent. And again, as I said earlier, a real mark of undemocratic concentration of power in the executive.
Thank you, Professor London. It is really interesting, but we just need to take maybe 2 more questions before the end of the presentation, before the end of this session.
May I take 2 seconds just to fill my water?
Yes, no problem. Yes.
All right, thank you. I'm ready.
Okay, you're most welcome. Two questions. How do we, this is a question from Sheikh J. How do we differentiate Americans of African descents from slavery and Americans of African families who recently migrated and got naturalized or were born there? This is the first question.
Hmm.
Yes.
So you mean the,
The-
the distinction between people who are the descendants of enslaved Africans versus people of African descent who arrived more recently, who arrived as maybe the children of immigrants or somebody like Barack Obama or something like that. Is that what you're asking?
The question is, how do we differentiate Americans of African descents from slavery and American African families who recently migrated?
Oh, so like current, like recent
were
African,
born there? Yeah.
recent African immigrant families, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I don't have a great deal of insight into this issue. I think it's an interesting one. I've recently had students from Nigeria in some of my classes, some of whom sort of grew up partly in Africa and partly in the United States, who've had, really interesting life experiences that they've shared with me. I'm trying to think if I have anything knowledgeable to say about this. I think that from I'm good. I wish I could remember this example better. So forgive me for this is a vague memory of a story that I should recall better. But I believe that 15 years ago or so, a man from Mali was shot 19 times by police officers in New York. And I'm maybe getting some of the details wrong, so forgive me. But he saw police approaching on a dark street and thought, okay, they're going to want to see my ID. And he reached for his wallet, and they gunned him down. And it's one of these many far too many tragic stories of police violence, in particular against unarmed Black men, certainly not only men. There's many stories like this. This one, is striking because he wasn't African American. He was a recent immigrant. He was African American in one sense, but as you say, he was not the descendant of enslaved Africans. He was just this guy from Mali who moved to New York, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was his.
Okay. The next question is.
It was his Blackness that mattered, and what the police saw was a Black man, and they didn't care. They didn't stop to ask. They didn't stop to think. It didn't matter, through the filters through which they were looking at this man. His identity didn't matter. So let me just spend another few seconds trying to answer the question. So I think that I can't speak knowledgeably to the different experiences of these two groups that you're pointing to. I can say that when people of African descent are subject to racism and prejudice in the United States, that people just look at them and see the color of their skin and make those kinds of judgments. So from that perspective, I think there's no differentiation. And certainly there's there's differentiation in terms of their life experience in other ways. I hope that's a helpful response.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, for having clarified this point. The last question is from Jai. Why the Declaration of Human Rights condemns genocide, America supports massive killings at Palestine? What is your opinion about that? Can I take it again? Yes. While the Declaration of Human Rights condemns genocide, America supports massive killings at Palestine. What is your opinion about that? This is from Senonjai.
Wow. Well, thank you for saving a really easy question for the end. Well, I think that, you know, when I had my slide up earlier, that, you know, I was trying to say, you know, some of the positive things about what America means in the world, and I had the pictures of the Roosevelts and these important human rights documents. You know, I said my first bullet point was something like, "Yeah, I know we haven't always gotten it right," and so there's always been this tension in the U.S. I mean, been one of the main supporters of human rights institutions, right? And in some instances, we've taken the side of human rights, and we've had an important impact. And a positive impact. And then we've also had these, you know, very hypocritical stances that we've taken in many different contexts, often supporting dictators. Certainly, you know, throughout the Cold War, we supported dictators who were human rights violators for strategic reasons, because we wanted them to vote with us in the UN or something like that, right? Or we wanted their oil or something like that. So there have been, you know, many times when we have been very inconsistent in terms of support for human rights. In terms of Israel-Palestine, I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, except to say that as an American, I've been deeply frustrated with both the Biden and the Trump administration for not doing more to bring peace. I think far more can be done. I think the U.S. can play a better role than it has, and that it's abdicated some of its responsibility to try to bring peace to the region. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor London, for this really brilliant presentation. And I would like to renew my thanks institution. The faculty department, really for Professor or Dr. Jack and Alaji Arunja. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so very much, Dr. Sissoko, our moderator of the panel.
Okay.
And thank you so very much, Professor Scott London. It's my pleasure to thank all of you and to express my deep sense of gratitude to each of you here, starting from the main public on the YouTube channel. I'm connecting to check what is happening there. From the beginning, over 800 students were following, people following from the YouTube channel. Until now, they're all there on the YouTube channel. Reason why everyone could not be in the Zoom room, we have restricted to our guests. It's my pleasure to congratulate our, speaker, Professor Scott London. I can't find the best word really to appreciate what you have done for our university, for our community. We just put it in the context of community service. You are a great scholar. Thank you for your intellectual generosity. I should not fail to appreciate the collaboration of the members of the Federal English Club and all the English Club of the university. They are our ambassadors. I always call them, you are our ambassadors. Once again, be, belong, build, and become. And I should take this opportunity also to thank our colleagues, our collaborators, the tutors, the administration, the staff, Dr. Sane may not be able to take the floor because he is in a meeting with the main administration, that's the university, board of regents that should meet today. So I'm not sure he is able to key. So through my voice, I thank everyone here, and I thank you all for your presence, for your commitment. And it's not the end, it is a beginning, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to say. Tomorrow day. Tomorrow at the national level, each digital open stage is going to a specific site and do some community service. For the English department, those who want to join us, I'm here at Dakar. All the faculty members are here. We're going to do the kickoff at the digital open space of Mermoz. So the English Club of Mermoz, see you tomorrow at 9:30. And once again, thank you so very much. I think we can end the session here. I appreciate everyone's effort, everyone's contribution, and all the various, components of the institution. DDC, DCM, DITZ, DFS, and the pôle LSHE, and everyone feel appreciated. I appreciate the technician here, the Maget Sal and Jakunda Sen and Madeleine Jallo, who have been assisting us for the 3 hours that we've been going. Thank you so very much. Have a good day and see you tomorrow. Thank you so very much. Have a nice weekend, Professor Scott. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.